I wanted to finish and ask you a little bit about income tax, because you mentioned it earlier. And I know your dad, Erwin Schiff, was not necessarily a fan of income tax. And I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about the man himself, your relationship with him, and some of his thoughts on income tax.
Yeah, no, he was not a fan at all. But again, neither would the founding fathers have been. I mean, the whole concept of an income tax was completely abhorrent to everything the founders believed in. And that's why we didn't have an income tax until 1913. And the only reason that we gave birth to this monstrosity was because the government convinced the public that it was only going to be on the very rich. It was going to be on the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts. In fact, it was sold to the public as being the beginning of a tax cut. What Americans were told was, hey, if we tax the rich with an income tax, we can get rid of these tariffs. And so instead of relying on tariffs, which the middle class pays, we'll rely on this 1%, 2% income tax, which the billionaires will pay. And the American public believed this nonsense. And of course, as soon as the camel's nose was under the tent, they jacked those rates way up. And by the Second World War, middle class Americans were paying the income tax for the first time. And now the whole country is struggling with that oppressive tax. So the thing that my father especially didn't like about the income tax was the unconstitutional and illegal way that the IRS enforced it, the way it collected it. And so my father stood up for the Constitution and for the rule of law, and in fact for the Internal Revenue Code, because in his opinion, the government even violated their own code in the way they collected and enforced the income tax. So he stood up for those principles and unfortunately spent a lot of his adult life, in his 60s, 70s, 80s in jail, and ended up dying in prison of skin cancer. If he hadn't been in prison, they would have cured it. But because the government did nothing about his skin cancer, even though he was in a hospital, supposedly, facility run by the government, it metastasized and spread, and he ended up dying of lung cancer. So, that's the quality of healthcare that you get when you get it from the government. But, I learned a lot from my father. Everything I know about economics, everything I know about the Constitution and government and all that, I learned from my father. And I also learned how corrupt the U.S. judiciary is and the U.S. government. And that's one of the reasons I didn't follow in his footsteps. And, I'm a good Nazi in that respect, right? I do what the government tells me because I know that I'm not going to get justice in the American legal system if I stand up for myself, because we're not really a nation of law. We're a nation of men. And unfortunately, we're a nation of very corrupt men. But, I still try to work within the system, as corrupt as it is, and, and do what I can, to do my best in that system.
And it was corrupt because it didn't give him a fair trial. It didn't actually go by the law and the code. He was making,
not at all.
He was making real arguments, and they weren't being considered. They just wanted.
My father was not a criminal. You can argue that he was mistaken in his views, and that maybe he should have paid a civil penalty for those mistaken views. But if you hold a view in good faith in this country, and you believe you're abiding by the law, that should not be a crime, especially if you're exercising your constitutional rights. If you think you have a particular constitutional right and you exercise that right in good faith, it should not be converted into a crime. And in most countries, even, not paying taxes is not a criminal offense. It is a civil offense. You can pay penalties, you can have interest payments, but they can't put you in jail for something like that. And I think my father is more of a political prisoner. He was sent to jail for his political beliefs, and he was sent to jail as an example to get people not to follow in his footsteps by putting him in jail and holding him out as an example. In fact, when he was in jail, every April 15th, the IRS would send around talking points to the media so they can mention that he was in jail, just to remind people, hey, it's April 15th. You don't want to go to jail like Erwin Schiff. You better pay your taxes.
Wow. It's interesting you bring that up. While we were just talking about potentially buying bread, at a non-government peg price and that being illegal, And then you look back to 2020 and say you had a business that stayed open during lockdown with a customer that wanted to buy something, and that was illegal. So,
oh yeah, look, they were shutting down, churches or synagogues. I mean, talk about violation of freedom of religion. The government was saying you can't have these religious services. But yeah, there were a lot of people who wanted to keep their businesses open. Were they criminals because they wanted to keep a business open? I mean, if people wanted to voluntarily risk COVID by going to those businesses, why can't they? People should be able to choose. You want to stay at home and quarantine? Stay at home. You want to go out? You have a freedom to travel. You could do business. You want a vaccine? Vaccinate yourself. You don't want it? Don't take it. I mean, I can't force my neighbor to get a vaccine because I claim it's going to protect me. You can't do that. You can't force other people to do things because you think that will benefit you. That's not freedom. That's not, because if you take that principle, I mean, what about all the, people that are overweight? I mean, doesn't that drive up my health insurance? Maybe we should force people to exercise. Maybe we should eliminate junk food. I need to mold people's behavior, because they may make a choice that somehow might impact me. Tough. People get to make their own choices. I can't force my will on other people just because I claim that, your behavior negatively impacts me, so I have a right to regulate it. No, it doesn't. I can't. I'm in charge of my own behavior, and other people make decisions. Now, if I want to limit my risks, if I think there's a bunch of unvaccinated people out there, I could wear a mask. I can vaccinate myself, or I can go to only businesses that check vaccination statuses. Businesses can make a choice. Here's a restaurant. We only have people with vaccines as customers. So if you're afraid of the unvaxxed and you want to eat in a restaurant where everybody's triple vaxxed, I'm your restaurant. We check everybody at the door. We do all that. If you don't give a damn, if you're not vaccinated and you don't care if the people at the restaurant aren't vaccinated, then go to that restaurant, right? So let the market decide. That's freedom. When the government makes a decision and it's one size fits all, it's not freedom. It's the opposite of freedom. It's tyranny.
Yeah, and that's what happened, just to be clear.
Yes, and not just in America. That happened all over the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you take, except for maybe like a Sweden, how many countries maintained freedom during COVID? There's that old saying about never let a crisis go to waste. Well, they sure didn't let COVID go to waste. Right? They usurped all sorts of power. They'll never surrender that power. Now that they've got it, they're going to use it over and over again.
Hey, you're starting to sound like
when it's not a pandemic.
Starting to sound like some of my conspiracy theory guests now, Peter, when you're talking like that. The greedy bankers are about to do it again. In 2008, they crashed our financial system and nearly bankrupted the entire global economy. Then they received trillions of dollars in government bailouts. And after, they demanded fat bonuses paid for by you, the taxpayer.
It turns out the banks haven't just been screwing the American taxpayers, they're also screwing over their investors. Turns out the banking industry is the worst place you could put your money, despite enormous taxpayer bailouts.
Now the bankers are back to take away your financial freedom. They lie and tell you that cryptocurrency isn't safe. They try to make it illegal for you to choose how to invest your hard-earned money. They lie and say cryptocurrency is used by money launderers and criminals. But look at the record. It's the banks themselves that launder hundreds of billions of dollars every year to the biggest criminal operations in the world.
Leaked documents have revealed how some UK banks have helped criminals, money launderers and Russians under sanctions.
American authorities discovered that the Sinaloa cartel moved $881 million through HSBC accounts as bank officials turned a blind eye to the illegality.
The bankers lie and say cryptocurrency is not a real investment. Meanwhile, the smartest CEOs in the world are buying billions and billions of it. The truth is that banks lie about cryptocurrency Because it makes them scared. The banks take $9 trillion per year of your hard-earned money, and they are worried that they will finally be exposed. They're scared because crypto means they can no longer control your money, which means they can no longer control you. They are scared because you might actually understand your money and intelligently decide what to do with it. Now is the time for us to come together, fight back, and take control. It's time to educate ourselves, our families, and our communities. Because financial education means financial freedom. We know that cryptocurrencies will help us build the new decentralized financial system of the future. A banking system that is of the people, by the people, and for the people. A banking system where access to finance is a fundamental human right. A banking system that is free and fair and welcomes all humans on this earth. The DeFi revolution is happening. We, the people, can no longer be fooled. We choose to take control of our finances. We choose to take control of our freedom. We choose to take control of our future. Join us, and let's take back our financial freedom forever.